Hi, have you ever thought about what message or what teachings you'd like to leave for your kids or grandkids? Most of us don't have the chance to really share everything we'd like our descendants to know. But how many of us take the time or have the time to write down our final message to the generations that follow? The teaching letter I'd like to talk to you about today is called Moses' Final Blessing. And there's 6 lessons from Moses' final blessing that I'd like to share with you today, and are covered in more detail in the accompanying teaching letter. The first lesson is that it's a blessing. In the last 2 chapters of Deuteronomy, in Deuteronomy chapter 34 and 33, Moses makes a choice of what are his last words going to be to the children of Israel. God has told him it's his time to go. It's his time to move on. And he could have left saying many different things. But I think the first and biggest lesson is what he chose to do overall was to not leave a series of sermons or rules about do this or don't do that, but instead the bulk of Moses' final message in Deuteronomy 33 and 34 is a blessing. Our second lesson comes from Moses' blessing for the tribe of Levi. As Moses talks to Levi, he reminds Levi of the great blessings and opportunities Levi has in his assignment to care for the tabernacle, and for the sons of Aaron to be the priests of God. But he also reminds Levi of the times they failed, the failings at the water of Meribah when they complained against the bitter water. I think the key lesson here is that God doesn't let our failures limit our future. The third lesson we look at is Moses' blessing to Joseph. Joseph, blessed to have 2 of the 12 tribes, because as Levi is not counted in the distribution of the land, both of Joseph's son, Ephraim and Manasseh, receive a share of the land of Israel. So Moses' blessing on Joseph is a blessing for the double blessing of both his sons. And what Moses focuses on is for Joseph to recognize and be thankful of God's gifts of creation. Our fourth lesson comes from 3 tribes, Zebulun, Issachar, and Gad. Moses blesses these 3 tribes, all brothers, or at least half-brothers. And yet, the blessings are very different. The skills and gifts that God has given them are very different. And the lesson for us is that God doesn't limit us by a family blessing that everyone in our family is good at this or good at that, but instead, God's plan for each of us is unique and special, and he gifts and equips us to be able to do it. The 5th lesson is the lesson of Moses' blessing to Naphtali and Asher. Now, if I were to ask you what things you can tell me about these 2 tribes, the answer probably is not much, because there's not a lot of detail recorded about those 2 tribes. But it doesn't mean that God didn't love them and have a special plan for them. They're the middle children. We talk about middle child syndrome, the middle child often being ignored. But God doesn't ignore any of us. And finally, our 6th blessing that Moses recounts and shares with the people, is the blessing of transition. Moses could have complained. He could have said, look at all I've done, and now God's pulling me out just when we're going to cross the Jordan River. But that's not what Moses does. Moses graciously transitions. He graciously hands the reins over to Joshua, and he encourages people to follow Joshua as their new leader. That's a lesson for all of us in life, and particularly in leadership, to be listening to the Lord, to know when our season is done, and to pass things on to the next person, to hand on the baton, not just begrudgingly, but joyfully, and encouraging people to follow the next person in line. I've just touched the tip of the iceberg by mentioning these 6 lessons. If you'd like to learn more, I encourage you to go read the teaching letter, Moses' Final Blessing. You'll also learn a little secret in there why sometimes these chapters are called the lost chapters of Deuteronomy. Thanks for listening.